time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. Enter the shadows, where every whisper is a clue, and the line between justice and obsession disappears. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we have Shannon Kavanaugh with us. Shannon is a former undercover officer as well as CSI agent. Shanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's start out with how you got into law enforcement. My understanding is you took a non-traditional route of starting out in undercover work.
I did.
Can you tell us about how that happened?
Yes. So I grew up in a really small town in Texas. So, our electives were future farmers of America or future homemakers of America. So I didn't get a lot of exposure. I'm kind of jealous of some of the kids these days that can take forensics in school and get more of an idea of what they want to do. So coming from this small town, I watched Silence of the Lambs, and my mom had gone back to college. So she was taking a lot of psychology courses that I was really interested in that were shaping, kind of funneling me into that drive that was already in my stomach. I knew I wanted to do something different than what I was exposed to in my small town. I just didn't know exactly what that was. So fast forward, I started applying to schools, and I wanted to go to the school in the Northeast. My parents had divorced, so I had family up in the Northeast, and it just appealed to me. So after watching Silence of the Lambs, people can probably resonate when you hear something and then you just know it in your gut. And I knew, based on that character, I wanted to solve homicides. I wanted to work homicides. Again, didn't know how I was going to get there with a town with 600 people in it and a graduating class of 63, but that's what started the steps towards law enforcement. And then after college, I had worked in mental health, ruled that out, went back to school for my master's degree, but working in mental health helped me. And that is something that I drive home when I teach students, is that none of your time is wasted. Everything, whether you're a landscaper as a kid, whether you work at Dairy Queen, whatever you're doing is preparing you in some way or another. And so that experience helped. And I went back to school, got the degree, and then just started applying all over. And I got picked up by Hudson County Prosecutor's Office, which is another interesting story. But they put me right into undercover work. They did not pay. I mean, I was below poverty line. We all were. We had multiple jobs, but Hudson County is across from New York City. So my first undercover was watching, I had the Twin Towers behind me while I'm saying, "Can I have some crack, please?" And the confidential informant elbowed me and said, we don't say please and thank you to drug dealers. And I was like, well, I grew up in Texas, and they told me in undercover school that I need to lie close to myself, like close to who you really are. And I took that, to heart, and I did that, and I stayed myself and just kept my story as close to who I was as possible. So that was my intro.
What was the training like for that? You mentioned that you went to undercover school.
Mm-hmm.
Did they actually have a formal academy for you, or what was the certification like?
Yes. Yeah. The great question. So when you got into narcotics, it was a statewide training. And ironically, the same guy, I'm going to say his name, he's passed. He was one of my mentors my entire career, starting in the police academy, Barry Graves. He's well known throughout New Jersey. He's trained just about every undercover narcotics officer in the state. In fact, I had lunch with a couple of colleagues from New Jersey about a month ago in Lockhart, Texas, where the It's the Texas barbecue capital. And one of those guys knew Barry, was trained by Barry. So in the police academy, he trained me, and then he helped to run the undercover. It's called Unit School, Undercover Narcotics School. And then there's also a school called Top Gun, which is just for narcotics officers. So we went to that one first. That was a week long, and then Undercover Narcotics School. So it's all scenarios. I mean, they put you in some precarious situations, and then just like in the police academy where they're testing you under stress, under a controlled environment, and they're like, you're shitting kittens now, what are you going to do on the streets? And the most entertaining part of that is they also took assistant prosecutors and put them in undercover situations, because I mean, I had prosecutors saying, oh, all your reports are the same, they're cookie cutter. And I'd say, yeah, the reports might be cookie cutter, but wait till you get in a car with somebody. And some of them got to experience it, which was really good. It made them better prosecutors so that we worked better together. But that was amazing training. I made great connections. And that's ultimately, he worked for the county that I eventually wound up working for, and things came full circle. I wound up being a sergeant right alongside him. And it's just so ironic how many of those relationships came full circle in my career with some great men that were my mentors, teachers, partners. So that was my intro, right out of the academy, buying narcotics, trial by fire.
So what's that first buy like? Were you nervous?
Oh, yeah.
I assume you're buying like $20 crack rocks or
Sure,
$10
yeah.
crack rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. You
However much
nailed
it
it.
was then.
Yeah, just a little crack. I was definitely nervous, and the way my brain works, there's like two certain types of people: the people that can memorize every line in a movie, and the type of people that are like, they talk about how the movie made them feel, like right brain, left brain. And I was like, look, Sarge, I got the crack. And he's like, that's cute and all, but what was the plate of the car? How tall was your target? How many steps to the front door? All these details that he said. He goes, I want to know what his breath smelled like, and it really trained me to start paying more attention and being more detail oriented, which was a little out of the ordinary for me. But I had such an amazing sergeant, and yeah, I was very nervous, but exhilarated and excited. And this career was for me. I was so grateful to be put in narcotics first, because the way our state was structured, you're at will, so they can transfer you to any unit at any time. And I was just really grateful based on, I had been bartending in Hoboken, so I had a bird's eye view of the narcotics. It was a subculture of club drugs at that time: ketamine, GHB, ecstasy, all of that. So I had that institutional knowledge. My chief was a retired FBI agent. He saw the value and just threw me right in.
And are you working your way up, or are you just staying at the street level as far as when you're buying?
I stayed at that street level that was our job, to determine what level of dealer we had. So
Okay.
Along with it, great question. The goal is to work it up, but not create a drug dealer. If they had too difficult of a time obtaining the weight that you were requesting, so it was very much a dance of feeling out what their capabilities were and how consistent they were. And, they get their bravado going. Yeah, I can get you a kilo. I can get you this or that. But then when it came down to it, could they really deliver it? And just as much as you want to get the bad guy, you don't want to create a drug dealer. That's kind of the language they use. Don't make him a second or first degree dealer if he's got to beg, borrow, and steal to get it. Like, we wanted to work it up to the source and cut the middleman out as much as possible, and also to cut that confidential. Felt like the confidential informant was just an impediment to me, and we had to have a good story, but then cut them out as soon as possible, because for their safety and for my safety, you don't know what they're going to say. You know, you can have control over the lies you're telling or the story that you have, but those confidential informants are a wild card, and any cop knows that they're tomorrow's target. They're probably today's target. So you got to be really careful. It's a necessary element to get introduced, but then cut them out for safety.
And that's really interesting as well, because some departments will do the exact opposite. They will not allow their drug officers, whatever you want to call them, to actually do the buy. They'll actually have, like with Raleigh, it's a confidential informant that actually buys it, and the drugs and vice detectives are more or less like the babysitters and making
Mm,
sure that the cameras work and keeping surveillance on. But I know that this is a department by department thing. So with
right.
your department, you're cutting that guy out and
Mhm.
taking the reins and going forward, which is really interesting. Was there any moments where you had a, "Oh shit, this is going south," or "This could go south"?
Yes. I was made 3 times, and there's a lot of, going to undercover school or Top Gun school. It's a personal preference, and it's got to be that way, of if you carry a weapon, where you carry a weapon. It's your comfort level, whether you use your own name. People can go back and forth on that. Do you use your own name? I know in a high stress situation, I'm not going to respond to whatever made up name I've gotten. So I did use my own first name. We can go more into that in another topic, but yeah, all 3 agencies that I worked narcotics for in New Jersey, we all were trying to cut that confidential informant out as much as possible. And case in point, one of them promised a drug dealer that I would smoke crack with him. And you can imagine that I was infuriated. And I humiliated that confidential informant. He also, you don't want them telling the lie for you. So it got really sticky. He told this guy that I was his girlfriend. Now, nothing wrong with him. Okay. However, he was about a foot shorter than me. We had to meet at the mall. So I'm like, all right, you want to be my boyfriend? I took my arm, put it around him like this. He's under me. And I'm like, if you're my boyfriend, I like a lot of physical affection. You better hug me up. So I used it as a learning point for him, a teaching moment. And then after I bought on my own, and that drug dealer had me in a spot in my car where surveillance units were nowhere around. I did not have a Kel, which is a recording device where surveillance can hear you. And I knew it was me, and this was my best weapon, my mouth. And I had to get myself out of that situation safely and be able to buy from him again. But that one was really hairy, even though it was a small town. It wasn't the type of town where you think is so super dangerous. But the danger is that they knew every car in that town. They knew who was coming in and out, and I didn't fit. And so it just, that's why when people are like, "Oh, it's just a weed buy, it's just in blah 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 town," you can't ever have that in your mind, that it's just this or just that, or it can't ever just become routine. You can't drop your guard. And Barry really reinforced that. So that was a big wake up call on, like, not getting too arrogant or too keeping that humility, that things can become dangerous no matter where you are if you're dealing with these kinds of people. So that one, there was a few others where they say if you feel the hair on the back of your neck standing up, walk away. But here's the problem. You're a young undercover, male or female. You want to make it go. You want to prove yourself. And like feeling that pressure, you can't dismiss it and then put yourself in harm's way, which I know any undercover can probably say, I did it, but you learn from your mistakes. There's a few others that I got out of, and I saw the dealer after the deal was made hours later. I was running on the boardwalk one time along the Atlantic Ocean, and one of the dealers I saw on his bike, and I said, let me head this off the pass. So I started waving at him before I got made, and made a point of saying, yeah, I try to balance it all out, smoke the crack, run a few miles, just, you got to just have your story.
That's
And
awesome.
that's why I lied as close to the truth as possible, because I was a fit drug user. So you got to just improvise sometimes.
And how long did you stay in the prosecutor's office?
Well, till retirement, between the 3 agencies overall, with all time, I retired after 20 years.
Okay, so you were working with the drug unit, and then didn't you go to another department to work?
I was transferred. Yes, I went down to the last agency I was with, and there I wound up in narcotics. And then after several years, I said, hey, I want to use my degree. I always wanted to be a CSI, work homicide. So I finally got that opportunity, and in 2006.
Okay. And at some point in time, you're a part of a tactical team. I've got to bring
The
that
whole
up.
time. Yeah, the whole time I was. That was in 2002. Yeah, for all 3 agencies, I got to be, most of the time, the only female on the narcotics tactical team, and I loved it. Loved it.
So you actually got to do the buy and then later get on the team and kick the door in?
Yes.
That's
It
awesome.
was, yeah. So there was a couple differences. When I was up north, where in New Jersey, where it was highly, highly populated, you could do that. You could make a buy and probably not see those people on a search warrant. But then when I got down to Monmouth County, it wasn't as highly and densely populated. So I would wear balaclava. I have one here, where y'all have seen this, where only your eyes are showing.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and then we would use a pseudo name for me on the search warrant, because I was also gathering all of the evidence. I was constantly in charge of evidence, which was great preparation for me to be a CSI. So yeah, I was able to do the buys and then get all of that energy and angst out on the search warrants, which was really cool.
I don't think that people really realize that with search warrants, that it's not just you kick in the door and then you make the arrest or get the drugs and the money and then walk out and leave. It's a ton of paperwork afterwards.
Oh yeah,
And it's a
and
lot of
searching and
right,
searching.
right. And going
Right.
through nasty places of the house. So
Yeah.
that's something that obviously didn't bother you because you wanted to get into CSI work, right?
Oh yeah, it was a great preparation. Nobody could have prepared me for how much time I was going to spend in dumpsters, or all of us in trash cans, dumpsters. I mean, it is. People are like, I want to be a CSI. So many young students that I've had, I want to be a CSI. I'm like, do you know you're not going to eat? You're not going to sleep. You're going to miss so many things. There's no, like, gotta go. It's 5. I mean, I've said to some of my counterparts, like, this ain't quick check. You don't like punch out at 5. We're staying. Um, it's just, I really try to, when I teach, to tell the truth about what the expectations are, so there's no confusion, because this is not a career for everybody. It is just not. Even other cops, like, I didn't want to be in white collar crime. There's a lot of cops who don't want to, like, smell dead bodies. That was my jam. I loved that dirty world, and especially the autopsies and what the body tells you post mortem. It's just, there it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
so
my
I've got a
first
picture
career.
of her. What even is that on the table? Is that
Someone's hand.
that's what it looked like, but I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
And I have his thumb on my index finger. So that was my first really bad decomp, which is decomposition. And that's basically a guy it was a clear-cut heroin overdose. And when the county is called, the local towns can take care of that themselves, but we got called because the guy was just refusing. he was one of those that was not cut out for a crime scene. And the patrol officers were all out, and they're like, he's upstairs, you go get him. And I was still a new CSI, under the tutelage of my mentor. And it's gross. Yes, it stinks. Yes, it stays with your body for several days. It cycles through you. It's, disgusting, but I got to do the gloving technique. So to identify him, even though he had his identification in the room, there's a legal way to identify based on the medical examiner's office. And they're the ones that the body is their evidence. So proper identification is necessary. And the best way to do that was going to be through fingerprints, because as you can imagine, a decomposed body is really bloated. His face was huge. He had been purging in a trash can. So we don't want to victimize family by identifying. So the best thing I can do is we're qualified to be fingerprint analysts in the CSI school. And so taking the gloving technique, the epidermis and the dermis begin to separate. Gases are purging from the body. Liquids are purging from the body. And so with those gas bubbles that do release when you start moving the body, the skin starts to slip. It's called skin slippage. And the hand the epidermal layer of the skin, it actually came off, which made it easy to then, on a gloved hand, place his hand over yours and do the gloving technique, which I get completely nerded out. This is like what I went to school for. This is what I wanted to do. And we were able to make the identification. So
Let's talk about that, because I want to explain of what that training's like, and how is the CSI agent attached to the department. So like down here, we've got what's called CCBI, and they work for the entire county and work for multiple agencies, and they
Are they
respond
civilian?
when they're, some of them are sworn and some of them are civilian. They've started to transition to more less sworn because of the cost.
Right. And living in Texas, I did, when I taught in the police academy in New Jersey, I did my research and realized that there are a lot of states that do that hybrid type of setup. So when I went to school, I said, well, if I want to be a CSI, I have to be a sworn law enforcement officer. And I was fine with that. But I do recognize that cost and the training and all of that. I was glad to go through that 6-week training and be sworn, because think about it. If you're out, all the bad guys are doing the bad things. Those calls are coming in between all those witching hours, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5. And I like to be out at a murder scene with my gun, because people can linger around and you're still in some sketchy neighborhoods. And for me, it worked. I liked it. And plus, you're not depending. I know with civilian CSI, they're depending on the sworn officers for their safety. And I just always felt better when I, took my safety into my own hands. And maybe that's from my undercover work, knowing I've got my team out there, but it really rests on me to keep myself safe. And so I really liked that part of it, that it was sworn officers.
And just to be clear, like, you were working for one department, or are you working for multiple departments, like in an area?
So our county had 53 municipalities at the time. So we would be working for that county, the prosecutor's office, and all the towns within the county. So any town that needed our assistance, of course, we're going to go to every homicide, every baby death, every suspicious death, the overdoses, a litany of, but if sex crimes needed some help photographing a scene and collecting, or if a town just didn't have the training or the money to be processing, or didn't have the confidence, they could call the sergeant that's on call, which became me at some point when I got promoted. And just, we worked really well together, and giving them advice like, hey, Instead of me driving a half an hour up there and fingerprinting a gun box, just collect it properly and I'll help you out with it tomorrow. So just to kind of help with the overtime too. Or the homicide scenes, it's not like we were the FBI and we're coming in and taking the case. We're working together because it is for the county superior court. And it behooves us all to do it the right way so that our cases can be prosecuted properly. Because what's the point of getting the bad guy if something's going to get thrown out at the end because you used improper procedures? So we really all worked well together, and I like that part of it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think that if you follow true crime and you follow the Karen Reed trial or these other more high profile cases, you'll really see the importance of, crime scene management and collecting evidence at the scene and how important that is that it's stored and documented properly.
Chain of custody.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because all of that comes into question later
100%.
at trial.
Especially if they have nothing else, they're coming after the CSIs.
Right.
And there was such a mental relief to me that the facts are the facts, the evidence is the evidence. I didn't have to try to make anything fit with some scenario that someone gave me. It kept it pure for me.
Did you have any high profile cases while you were working that?
I did. There's a couple that I got emotionally attached to, which you probably shouldn't, but it just happens. But others that there was one in particular that the facts are stranger than fiction. There was a guy, there was a custody battle and they had just gone through a divorce. And this woman and her father killed this man in broad daylight in their driveway at like 8 o'clock in the morning when he went with the baby child inside the house. He drops his daughter off. She goes in the house and they lured him over to the garage area, the basement area, blunt force trauma, screaming, everything right in the middle of the driveway, first thing in the morning, brazen, arrogant. And that's how they presented the entire case. So many twists and turns. So then not only did they kill him, this is my favorite part of the story. They pay a local drug dealer. So I'm from the drug world. I know how those drug dealers work. And I was kind of like, I had to give that guy props. He was the MVP of this case. So he takes the money from the dad, her father. He's in on it. The mom's in on it. Everybody's in on it, the whole family. And so the drug dealer is supposed to put him in his trunk and go set the car on fire in a neighboring town. The drug dealer takes the money and then goes like, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Call the cops? So then her father, right? He's the MVP. So her father wound up having to drive the car to the neighboring town and set it on fire. Not before he got rid of evidence. Now, this is ironic. I used to play beach volleyball in a town in the county on Monday nights. Well, we went back to pull the footage from this restaurant bar that was on the beach. And the same night I'm playing beach volleyball, I didn't even, like, the body wasn't even discovered at this point yet. But I was there when he was depositing the evidence in a dumpster and we wound up getting that footage. So there was just a lot of irony to it. And we discovered the body at like 4 o'clock in the morning. They'd lit it on fire, huge fire in the street. They put out the fire. And then when the medical examiner took the body out of the trunk, this is gross, but we talk about gross things and
oh yeah, go ahead.
That's right. So we look and on his body, he's doused in gasoline and I see a belly button. I thought it was his belly button. The heat was so hot that it actually took his, and inverted it into his body. So it was like he had a belly button and then a few inches below looked like another belly button, but his privates had, right? So of course I'm taking pictures of it and I'm gonna like fast forward real quick to a side story, but so I'm teaching in the police academy about this case that just unraveled and kept going and going and going. And I said, so have you ever taught cops? Have you ever had to teach cops while you were an officer?
Have I?
Yeah.
Yes, I was a taser instructor.
Okay. Are they not the worst? Are we not the worst students ever?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Cops
like
are
dealing with a bunch of 5-year-olds, especially when you give them a taser. It's
right.
like we're betting on who's gonna, shock themselves with it, and yeah,
Yeah.
you have to use a lot of kid gloves.
Right. So I'm glad that it's universal. So I've got a chief in the back of the classroom, and he's reading the paper blatantly with his feet kicked up, and they have to go to this course. It's like a detective enhancement course. So I have all the females sitting up front, and the men are all in the back doing their thing, and I said, yeah, and his penis was inverted. And then I looked at the ladies and I go, kind of makes you wonder what he was working with before, right? And they just roar. I said it so quietly that the guys didn't hear. And then they're all mad, like, what are you ladies laughing about? I said, well, you should have sat up front. But anyway, I use humor, but I have to give this caveat, and I'm sure you do too. Just because we use humor, it's never disrespect to the dead. It's never diminishing the pain that family is feeling. So this dark humor is just kind of like inserted, and it's necessary. And I came to the field with an inappropriate 14-year-old boy sense of humor, and it really helped with my survival and aligned me with the right people who had the right kind of mental processing that I did. And yeah, it's messed up, but finding the humor in some really difficult cases and
Right.
situations is key. I'm sure you can speak to that as well.
And that's something I don't think that a lot of people realize is that, I mean, you're spending a lot of time around dead bodies or decomposing and literally falling apart. I've never heard of a person's penis being inverted before. That is
Me
crazy.
either.
But
20
you're
years.
absolutely right that I mean, I remember one of the stories we're out on a really bad wreck where a guy's arm got lopped off, and a state trooper, which those guys are normally, are like the really heartless ones
Street
and don't
dogs.
have filters, went
Right.
over, picks the guy's arm up, waves it in the air, and goes, "Does anyone need a hand?" And this was like in the middle of the hood. So we're the only white guys are the police officers, and this guy that's, like a big 6 foot tall or 6'4" tall redneck. And I was like, this is going to turn into Mogadishu, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, we're about to have a riot, and he's just laughing his ass off. And I was like, that is funny though, you
it
know?
is. And I was going to tell you a story like that because we had this guy who's he was our body removal guy, and he was cooked. I still keep in touch with him. He's one of the funniest guys. And he did something similar because we had New Jersey Transit commuter trains through our entire county going to New York City every day. I had a lot of train suicides, especially young people. It was like a cluster at one point. It was really, really sad, very hard. And one of them was a salutatorian of the class. And you're just like, oh my gosh, don't you see, how their brain, they can't see that they're going to get through this. There's going to be other girls. And, he was heartbroken and just jumped in front of the train. It's devastating. But my body removal guy used to do that. There was an arm that got lopped off. He did the same thing. And you've got commuters on the train, and he considered it his mission to make me laugh at scenes. And a lot of times there's press out there. So you really have to be careful. That started making its way into our county. And I'm like, don't make me laugh, because of course it can be misconstrued as a lack of respect, a lack of dignity for the crime that you're, processing. But he always used to try to make me laugh. He still does, and he succeeds.
Yeah, and I meant we used to be brutal to each other too on our squad. We had 20 guys, And it was, like 13-year-old humor would be
Yeah,
the best way to put it on how to
yeah,
deal with those situations.
definitely.
But, it's how you deal with high levels of stress like that. Guys
Mhm.
usually either turn to that or alcohol,
Alcohol.
or, everyone has a starter wife or spouse.
Yep.
Some of them have more. So we
Mhm.
really don't deal with it, appropriately, to say the least. How is that being a woman and working, in CSI and in your other jobs? Were you treated the same? Was it more difficult?
Thank you for asking that question. It was great until it wasn't. And from my perception, I saw a big change when I decided to start a family, when I got pregnant. Um, the treatment was so subpar. And at this point, I had almost 17 years on the job where I was on call, kicking doors in, narcotics, just so much sacrifice. So much sacrifice was just expected and not compensated. Never compensation for being on call my entire career. Never. Because the people on call in my office were not the majority, it just wasn't. Well, you asked to be in homicide, you asked to be in narcotics, was like, okay. So when
So
I
you weren't
became,
paid overtime or comp time or anything?
you were paid overtime if you got called out, but to be on call, like we flexed our hours in narcotics, which isn't legal, but it was a give and take. You kind of understood, or they had some grants that were a fraction of the pay that we would get at overtime pay, and we just took it because it was a give and take. If there was no job going on, they're going to let you go and come back, and it worked until it didn't. And when I became pregnant, that's when my heartbreak began, because I was a sergeant in narcotics. No one could ever argue with my work ethic. So I felt like it was a complete discard. I think it was ignorance. I think it was they didn't know what to do with me. I was the first female that became pregnant in my office in the history that was in narcotics, that was in what we called field units, active units. There were other people who had babies that were in different units where it could be worked around really easily, but we didn't have a pregnancy policy. They didn't know what to do with me. So, and I was afraid of what they were going to do. And it was worse. I mean, I take ownership that I was out doing undercover stuff. I was buying cocaine pregnant, but I didn't tell anybody that I was pregnant. I was hiding it. And come to find out, when I started teaching around the state about the role of the undercover as a female, and when I started teaching about pregnancy, and it wasn't to demonize the men, it was just like to open up this conversation, because my treatment was so terrible and it caused so much lasting trauma, pain, and health issues for my son by being born a month early. And I know that was due to stress, but it was stress that I couldn't manage. I was not in control of what was being done. And it's just really heartbreaking after you feel like you've made so much of a sacrifice. And I did feel like one of the guys. I was accepted. My mentors were men. It was heartbreaking. It was betrayal, abandonment, all those deep, like this sense of justice that I always had and carried since I was a child. It just, I guess you could call it in the spiritual terms, like a dark night of the soul. Like, really? I had to be told that I was being transferred. I'm a ranking sergeant in that office that has proved myself. And as a woman, yes, I did have to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, more education, and constant proving and proving. I didn't even realize like I was doing that. So yeah, it was really tough. And but before that, I did have a beautiful career and I figured it out. And the other painful part was, because I was a whistleblower and I did, the next woman that became pregnant in my office, I took it. I kept asking to be transferred. I could see on their faces, they were just, the decision was made. In fact, I was told by the only female high-ranking officer in my office. I called her and I said, "Look, I don't use our relationship or our friendship, but what are they doing?" And she said, "You can't tell anybody this, but the boss said this is a done deal. I don't even want anybody's opinions about this." They knew it was wrong and they did it anyway. And the problem is, when you work for a prosecutor's office, we just became chess pieces on a board. And because of, I had worked in crime scene, I worked in narcotics, I worked in this one and that one, and I have evidence of that it was being planned behind my back. Like I had like phone calls made to me and things revealed, but I didn't have the energy to fight while I was pregnant. But I did advocate for the next woman who became pregnant, and I'm happy to report that her experience was a complete 180 to mine. And I did get a pregnancy policy in place in my office. It doesn't protect the officer, it protects the county, it protects the department, but it was a start. And I hope that continues, that the education, that the knowledge, that just pleading ignorance is not enough. And I hope that it continues to change, that the field continues to change. But I did see a counselor when I was a therapist, when I was about to retire, and I had a really high profile homicide case trial coming up. It was the most important case to me, and it was the year I wound up retiring. And it all kicked back up again, like they were coming for me again, because I was a whistleblower. I told the truth. And
What are some of the things that they're doing to you?
just the things that they did in my office, not just to me, was they would set people up for failure. You want to be promoted? Okay. You're going to take the problem children. They wanted to see you fail. They wanted only the people that were their boys to succeed. And we're fine with that. You went to college with your buddy. Of course, if I had a college buddy that I trusted, if he's qualified, I'm going to promote him too. But what's the saying? Don't piss on me and tell me I'm raining. It's a bunch of cops. We have pretty good intuition for the most part. We can see through a lot of bullshit. And so to be doing things like that, and then our problem was, and I'm speaking for myself, but at the time, there was a lot of agreement that you don't have to try to destroy somebody else's career or their reputation to promote your buddy. Just fucking do it. Just promote your buddy. Just, you know what I mean? But it was all that they had the energy to work behind the scenes and do these moves. But what I'm speaking about when I say what was done to me is getting transferred from narcotics to crime scene at 7 months pregnant. While in crime scene, everything is carcinogenic. As a sergeant, you are on call 24 hours a day, being woken up in the middle of the night constantly to help out these other departments. And if it is a homicide or major crime, the sergeant's role is to report to that crime. So it made absolutely no sense. I didn't even fit the requirements. Did I want to be sergeant of crime scene? Heck yeah, I earned that. But not when I'm 7 months pregnant. So it put me in physical danger. It put me in emotional danger. It put my child's life because of my stress level. And then they didn't even have the balls to tell me themselves. I had my subordinate actually called me. They did the old 5 p.m. transfer. They put it out after everybody had left for the day, and on a Friday afternoon. And I had my subordinate call me and ask me if I was sitting down, because he worked in crime scene and narcotics, so he knew. And then just dragging it along for another 3.5 years before I finally got a desk job. So after all those years of being in a field unit, to have to beg for my family to have a desk job, it was injustice, period.
And I completely understand that the job description that is required, or the job skills that are required for being a CSI agent, do not correlate or work well with someone that's pregnant. And they should know better. It amazes me that they don't actually have an actual policy on this type of stuff, because
It
I
wasn't
know
that long
the
ago.
department that, I was with Raleigh for 16 and a half years, everything had a policy. If you
Mhm,
were pregnant, you went to, they called it the CRC, which is like a report writing center that people on light duty would go to. And you would be there until you were able to, get your job back, or you could put in for a transfer to somewhere. But
mhm.
this sounds like you're with a smaller agency that really just doesn't have their shit together, as far as, I mean, not having a leave policy or maternity leave policy
Mhm.
that stipulates where you go during that time and whatnot. That really is amazing in a bad way.
Everybody says that. The therapist I went to was like, "What? This goes on in this day and age?" And the dichotomy that was shocking is how progressive our field was. My CSI unit, I I have gratitude every day that the people that trained me. I mean, these guys were up at 9/11. I got to go to 9/11, but they were processing remains to try to make identifications for families to give them that closure. I mean, I had an amazing lineage of mentors that taught me in a lot of the units. So for how progressive we were, and now me returning to Texas and kind of seeing the difference, I'm so grateful for the training I got. So it was so far ahead, and then just the treatment of the people was, like I said, a stark dichotomy, and not in a good way, just completely different. So while I'm so grateful for so many things, that one, and that's part of, I'm jumping around, but that's part of what I've been trying to heal from while I'm writing a book, because obviously I get very passionate about it. But I don't want to sit in a victim role of it. It pushed me to try to affect whatever change I could. It has, some of the things that have happened in my career have made me not so, I'm definitely not somebody with my head in the sand. With recent things that have happened in our country in the past few years, as we know, I'm not so quick to go for the okey doke, because when you see corruption at a lower level, you know how systemic it is the higher you get. When you see people who get power drunk, when you see people get promoted who don't know how to handle power, you you can kind of understand how things happen the way they do. So it's given me a big, like, I think at some point in my career I was quite naive, which is great. You should be when you're a young undercover. You should just be focusing on, I got to make the buy, and not everything else that's going on. So it makes me wonder, were things already like this? Probably, but I just wasn't in a position to recognize it until it did impact me personally. And then when it did, I feel a responsibility still to this day to ensure that some of the things I experienced, other people can use what has happened and arm themselves and have knowledge, and maybe not fall into the same pitfalls I did. Don't we all kind of say that? Like, if you can learn from other people's mistakes instead of crashing, burning with your own, you kind of set yourself up a little bit better. So after all these years, I try to learn and recognize the lessons that are coming for me in my life, and not resent them, but understand this is a lesson I'm supposed to learn. And then, even more on top of that, you learn your lesson, but then you alchemize the pain to transmute the pain, transmute the lesson, so that you can help others with it. And that's when you master things. I'm not a master of anything, but I'm learning. I'm trying.
Yeah, and I think that's very good of you. And I think that when you're having fun in a job, which, and from the pictures I've got here, it looks like you are. Here's you
Yeah.
getting your crime scene kit out, and looks like you've got some.
Oh, that's my Donna. She
Which one
was
was that from?
the one in the middle was my lieutenant in crime scene. So they put at some point, talking about setting up for failure, they put 2 females in charge of crime scene with 2 detectives who thought they deserved to be in our position. So what a firestorm. I mean, but this woman is brilliant. She has her PhD. I have my master's from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. She has her PhD. So she is way smarter than me. And we were both in charge. And I told them from the beginning, I don't think it's a good idea to have 2 females in charge of a unit. Not that I'm sexist, obviously, but I could just kind of see the intentionality of it. And I could see the bigger picture of what was going on. And it was hell. It was real hell. But we navigated our way through it. And we're friends to this day. She's an amazing woman.
So as you're kind of transitioning, or when you transitioned out of law enforcement, what did that look like?
Oh boy. That first year, there's a reason that chapter is called Downward Spiral Dog, because I picked up yoga based on intuition. It didn't make any sense when I got promoted to sergeant, because as you had mentioned before, Cameron, it's a lot of our coping mechanisms were working out and drinking and decompressing, and a lot of pig roasts and PBA parties with a lot of meat. There was a lot of meat eating in our bonding. But I knew intuitively I needed something different for coping, something better. And I never liked yoga because you're a cop, you're type A, you're like, go, go, go. I always lifted and ran and did all those things. And it really resonated with me. Plus, I have learned in my astrology that I am double fire and air, and I've just got a lot of masculine energy, and that came to my benefit, but I knew I needed more balance somehow. And so after I had taught yoga throughout, and I taught college after that point, so those were great creative outlets for me. And I didn't realize that intuition was asking for me to balance some of that masculine out within me. Teaching was creative, yoga was creative, it was feminine. And then when I retired, everybody says, get ready for retirement. So I thought I had it at least I had some things figured out. I did not. I had already gotten my yoga teacher certification. I had already been teaching. I'm like, I'll just teach college, teach yoga. I opened up a business after Downward Spiral Dog, and I quit drinking, and I started looking at my stuff. I faced the fact that I'd been through a lot more than I was willing to face. And, the excessive drinking was a symptom of it. It was a symptom of what I needed to deal with. So I don't demonize myself over it. I don't have shame over it. If I had to go back and go through that career again, I don't know how I would have done it without alcohol and camaraderie. But once I finished, it was time to really grow up and look at my stuff and also have grace for myself and grace for all of us. What has helped me a lot is realizing that when you're in survival mode, just by virtue of the job, we're in survival mode. Add on to that you're in survival mode with your own colleagues. You're in survival mode with your supervision. To me, that was harder. That's what left the most stuff I needed to work on. I'm not saying that some of those cases weren't hard and that I didn't need to deal with a few of them, but it was a lot less than the betrayal, those wounds of betrayal and lack of justice and discard and abandonment. And I'm not saying that I didn't play a part in all of it too. What I'm saying is when everybody's in survival mode, it does not bring the best out of people at all. And if you're already a shitty person to begin with, you're going to be even shittier. But all of us weren't at our best. But some people, you got to recognize too, that some people worked a 9 to 5 for 20, 25 years. They worked in white collar, or they worked in another unit that they weren't squeezed the way you are when you're in homicide, when you're educating other cops, when you're out on the streets, when you're kicking doors in. Like, a lot of people would look at me like, why don't you just get over that? But each person's journey, even if they work for the same office, is completely different. Some of us shared some similar mishaps and experiences, but just kind of honoring that we all have our own journey and our own lessons to learn that are personal for each one of us. So in retirement, I have opened up my own yoga business. I moved back to my small town in Texas. I needed my nervous system to be able to calm down. I needed to do the things that I've been able to do for myself to not feel like a victim of the career, because I don't want it to be skewed by a few bad experiences when so much of it was absolutely beautiful. It was I believe what I was supposed to do. I saw evidence of that. It felt like a soul mission, a soul contract, and it's my responsibility to get through it so I can speak out, resonate with other people, help where I can, be of service where I can, and help myself and create my own peace and happiness here. And so that's the big thing I've been working on. I began writing a book 2 years ago. I hit a couple stumbling blocks with some of these topics we've discussed here today. And I decided to go back to counseling, get EMDR. I've attacked it from a lot of different places because I said, man, it's been 6 years. This week is actually my 6-year retirement anniversary. And I said, it's enough time. It's enough power being given away. It's time for me to get over this and do what I'm supposed to do in this next chapter, which may or may not be yoga, may or may not, I'm kind of leaving it up to my alignment of what I'm supposed to be doing, and trusting God, trusting the universe, and seeing, just like when I began my career, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what the exact job title would be. I find myself 25 years later sitting in a similar situation where I know I need to speak about these things, teach, podcast, write, but I don't know what the exact title is going to be, and it's okay.
You know what? You're not alone in that. When I left, I went from being a full-time police officer. Then I had a daughter with special needs. I had to go part-time. And then I just recently turned in that badge as well. And you're absolutely right about trying to find your space. And for me, I spent such a long time of my, adulthood doing one thing. And
Mm-hmm.
going at that pace like you were talking about. I worked in a high crime area. We were going call to call. We were always doing stuff, to being at home a lot and having a lot of time on my hands. And for me, I found that podcasting helped fill that void, and writing a book helped fill that void, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same. And I know that a lot of people listening are probably going through the same thing. So I really appreciate you coming on and being open and vulnerable about that, and about the effects that it has on you, because it really is difficult for me to
Thank
be in
you.
my 40s, and I feel like I'm almost a kid sometimes, like finding that new career.
Yeah, that's how it feels. I keep going back to that point. Like, you're supposed to do it. You just don't know how to get there. And then go back 25 years when we didn't have the internet. And my son gets on me with, we have kids similar ages, but back in my day, and I'm like, yeah, well, we didn't have the internet. I didn't like it. I didn't like it then. I don't, I knew it was hard to navigate, and networking, and networking gets a bad name, but bartending in Hoboken, I would just talk to anybody who would listen, and anybody who wanted to engage. And that's ultimately how I got my job. Was we hosted a New Jersey Bar Association party upstairs at one of the bars I was working at. And this guy wasn't hitting on me. He was legitimately like, you've got your experience. You make sure that your resume gets to this office. And that's ultimately how I broke into it. But it was 10 months of after I graduated, I have my master's degree. I'm like, I'm ready to hit the ground running. And there was a lot of being asked to wait and wait for the right situation. And what gives me trust is I had a mentor. My first sergeant was the best teacher. If he didn't know something, he would have the guts to get on the radio and ask, hey, where are you guys? And I found a lot of cops pretend like the ego is too big and the self-esteem is too small. And that's one of the Secret Service guys I worked with talked about the group that I said were quite treacherous. He's like, we called it in the Secret Service, big ego, small self-esteem. Well, that's dangerous. I realized early on the guys like my sergeant that actually had true confidence were the ones not afraid to ask questions, that weren't pretending to know it all, that would say things like, if I don't know the answer, I'll find out. And then they did. So I had so much great fortune in who I wound up being teamed up with, my police academy mates, friends to this day. Those early career moves, I was with the right people. And so having the faith right now that it takes some time to line things up for when you're going for a big mission. And so a lot of what I do is just self-study and healing and understanding myself, which gives me compassion for myself, but also gives me more compassion and understanding for other people. And that's a lot of, we talk about healing. Yeah, it's been a lot of healing, but at some certain point, I bought myself this necklace probably after I'd quit drinking for 6 months. And it says, you got to remember who the fuck you are. And that's what I'm doing now. Just figuring out who I am and allowing, we got to allow ourselves the room and space and grace to change. And I thought, well, I got to shut the door on law enforcement. No, I don't need to be investigating the crimes anymore, but I have this passion for a reason and I still do. So, I think a lot of us need some help with this transition, because I find a lot of us retiring have a lot of fear about what am I going to do? And it's not just, we all say, oh, I'll go work at Home Depot and gather carts. I don't want to have to think. I don't want to have to be, especially if you're a boss, I don't want to be in charge. But then at a certain point, there are people like us who do want to align with what our purpose is. And that takes a lot of quiet time, a lot of figuring out who you are. And that's really, I made a bold business move last October. And at the very final hour, I pulled out. It wasn't right. And I was using my intuition and I'm like, this is where I'm going with this. That was a big tower moment for me, because I said, okay, it was making me question my trust in myself. I was going for this. And the fact that when I pulled out of it, I felt relief. It's so much of figuring out where the emotions and feelings are in your own body as the guide for what you're supposed to do next. And I kept asking, okay, if this isn't it, if this is just my ego, let me let it go. I've done that with several things. I stopped teaching college. I said, if this is just for my ego, take it away. And it was an easy transition out of it. So much of what I'm doing is just saying a lot of no and finding a lot of boundaries, which is a new skill for me. Because the more no's are leading to your yes, in my opinion. A lot of failures and wrong turns and oops and
Right.
To just finding your way and honoring the person you're emerging and becoming.
I really think that Remember Who the Fuck You Are should be the name of your book. I think
Thank
that'd
you.
be incredible. Or make
Yeah.
that into a podcast name.
It's got to be somewhere in there. It's
Well,
like know thyself.
yes.
Carl Jung, with the greatest, I may be slaughtering this, but the greatest privilege you have in your life is becoming who you are. All of that.
So if people want to follow you through this next journey in life, how can they do that?
I am on TikTok, so I was very late to the game. Speaking about what I said before, how I look at with a suspicious eye at things, and as soon as our government was going to ban it, I'm like, what's going on over there? So I just was looking around, and I see a lot of really authentic people um, telling their stories, and that's my people. And I think that our society is feeling a push for discovering what, the truth is for them. And so I decided to start telling funny cop stories over there. Now, I worked with way more funny people than myself, and I look forward to collaborating with some of them at some point. But just telling some of my favorite stories on there, and it's at Shannon Kavanaugh, my name with a K. And on YouTube, I'm about to launch YouTube. I have my channel already. It's Shannon Kavanaugh, from the badge to the mat. The mat, like the yoga mat.
Gotcha.
And I'm not as active on Facebook, but on Instagram, it's my yoga at Shannon's Lotus Yoga. So I put wellness tips on there and yoga, and that's my thing. That's my outlet. It doesn't have to be everyone's. I do think yoga can be for everyone, but I think it's really important for us to all find our thing that just like levels us out, balances us, where you're doing it to such an extent that you don't think about anything else and you're in this flow, getting into the flow. So that's my 3 channels now, and I'm coming out from beneath some of the pain that I needed to get through to finish my book. So I will be finishing that. And I'm excited about where this all leads. And I'm really grateful to you for finding me and having me on this show, because it's time for me to start speaking. And it's been amazing riffing with you today.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think these are some valuable lessons that people can learn from, and I really look forward to the book and seeing you on YouTube. I think you're going to do great, and you're always welcome on this show again if you want to come back and update us on what's going on. If you'd like to support me, you can, first of all, I've got a book out. It is A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. It's a book that I did with my brother. You can buy that on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you can buy a book. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Santana True Crime, as well as follow us on Apple, Spotify, or whatever you listen to a podcast on. Shannon, thank you so much.
Cameron, thank you so much.